I'm opening. We have an eye, sort of a nostril, 2 teeth. One of the teeth has a small cavity. Close call, folks, but I think we got here just in time.
Presented by Maria Menounos and Kevin Undergaro. This is Anatomy of a Movie. In-depth discussions and breakdowns of various movie titles. And now that you've seen the movie, let the dissection begin.
Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to another dissection here at Anatomy of a Movie. We are doing Lucy, the 2014 Luc Besson film starring Scarlett Johansson in the title role and Morgan Freeman as a professor.
And profess he did.
That is the voice of Demetri Panos.
Hello, movie fans. Live long and prosper. Before we start, you may notice the shirt that I'm wearing. I'm doing that in commemoration of the big Star Trek convention taking place in Vegas, which unfortunately I was invited to go and I couldn't make it due to scheduling, but my great friend Erin at Creation, thank you for the invite. I apologize for not being able to make it there. I wish I was there with all my Trekkies, my Trekker brethren, but in commemoration, I have the Star Trek
alas, you are
shirt.
here.
So
that is your consolation prize
I
today.
am here, looking forward. We got lots going on, including Lucy.
Overall thoughts on Lucy. I mean, we'll talk a lot. There's a lot to discuss. We'll discuss from a movie perspective. We'll discuss how it beat out Dwayne Johnson's The Rock Hercules movie. And we'll also talk about the criticism of the science fiction aspect of things.
Yeah, I mean, for me, my knee-jerk reaction when I walked out of the theater was, it didn't make me angry. Some past Luc Besson projects made me angry, including Colombiana, which I call the beginning of the end for my like a Luc Besson, Taken 2, and 3 Days to Kill. All those movies, they made me angry. And this one, I sort of was getting into the action and everything. And then once I started to think a little bit more about it as I was driving here, in fact, yeah, ultimately the movie just made me angry. I like,
there's a lot of things. There's a lot of critics and news articles. And I think it was Mashable wrote up a great article of, while the movie preaches to use 100% of your brain power, the movie itself has audiences using 0% of it. Oh. And for the most part, I would say that's true. So it's one of those movies that, ironically enough, despite its message, is just grab your popcorn and just enjoy. Turn off your brain.
Sort of, but at the same time, I'm gonna say, yes, to me it was movie going 101. Like, if you have never been to a movie before and know concept and like editing and theme and what's going on, this movie might be great because from early on, we'd play out a scene, and then he would cut to, like, a scene of a mouse sniffing at a mousetrap. So, okay.
But here's the thing,
But that happened a lot. Like, the first time I see it, I said, okay, that's funny, and then he cuts to, like, a cheetah hunting down, like, an elk or something. The movie kept on doing that, and I was like, okay, you must think I'm a retarded clam. I get what's going on. You don't have to keep explaining the scene you just played. And
I don't think it was there for explanation. I think it was there to connect it with how this happens just throughout nature, right? Because Morgan Freeman's whole speech was about animals and evolution, and so rather than just talk about humans, it connected all the animals. So I don't think it was just there for plot. And I also think it built. Oddly enough for me, it built suspense, and at times it was funny. I mean, when they were talking about you either evolve or you reproduce.
Right.
And the reproduce they did.
And my favorite one was the frogs, because that male frog appeared to have the biggest smile on its face. It was like, I laughed out loud when I saw that. But let's talk Morgan Freeman, who spends, I'm going to say, 50% of the movie lecturing. And again,
that was okay. Rather than the flashback scenes, again, I thought those were used cleverly.
Yeah.
The Morgan Freeman one, that's where I can get your point about it was just too much exposition.
Yeah, and it was just all again. I get it, and then they would even use flashback with him lecturing, and I'm like going, oh my God, like, is he going to be in front of a class or a lecture hall for the entire movie? And I would say 50%, maybe almost 3/4 of the way before he gets out.
Yeah, and I always wondered, like, wow, no wonder Morgan Freeman is in this movie. All he had to do was film one scene.
It, pretty much. 2. Yeah, I mean, they moved him from here to another location.
Well, at the time, I thought it was just one.
Yeah, I'm like, oh, it was easy for him to do. There were parts of it, too, that sort of kind of reminded me of Transcendence. So I was having some flashback there. Morgan Freeman was in there. And
to me, this was better than Transcendence.
It was shorter. That's for sure. It didn't, it wanted to take itself seriously like Transcendence did, but ultimately it doesn't.
I don't think it did. I think I think by putting in 8 sporadic images of animal reproduction,
right.
I think it knew that it wasn't the most serious movie in the world.
Well,
and I think ultimately it didn't also go with that. It needed to go just a little bit further and rely more on its action and its comedy, and it could have won people over.
Yeah, I mean, when you say it could have won people over, I mean, we were looking at a movie that had a cinema score of a C+. So, my theories about Luc Besson now are as such. Like, I think I've pretty much given up on the guy. I remember early on, I was a big Luc Besson fan. This guy had written and directed some really great action movies that had some weight to them. And, La Femme Nikita was a great action movie, and, it was breaking walls down, and, he had a great, strong female character. He had some great action going on. He goes ahead, he does The Professional, introduces us to Natalie Portman, who, again, not a woman character, but a female character. She was fantastic. She was greatly written, and then when you paired her against the gentleman who plays Leon, I can't think of his name right now.
He's also in our favorite movie, Godzilla too.
Yeah. He was fantastic. And then Gary Oldman is in that as the villain, and he was fantastic. And Gary Oldman shows up again in The Fifth Element, which I'll give him. It had some great action scenes. Chris Tucker, to me, from The Fifth Element, hit an annoyance level, but Gary Oldman again chewed up the scenery. He was great. And I always would start looking forward to Luc Besson projects. And even when he was producing like Transporter stuff, I was in. I liked what he was doing, and Jason Statham and all this stuff. But just later on down the line, he just began to, regurgitate things. And I just find that now he makes movies that cut amazing trailers. Lucy is no exception. Trailers for his movies make me go, oh, I want to see that movie because it looks good. And then I go see the movie, and I feel like Michael Douglas in Falling Down, going, wait, that's not what was in the picture. Like, what?
The premise, I think right from the trailers, you knew that you were getting some insane movie. As soon as, again, just the concept of her using more brain power, which we'll talk about from a scientific perspective, but, and how that just gives her unlimited abilities, and where's this going to go? I think people were just sold on that idea.
Absolutely,
I was. Absolute destruction.
Weren't you?
Absolutely.
I mean, when you see the trailer, and plus it's Scarlett Johansson, who couldn't be hotter right now, as far as, and we know that she can carry action. You look at her in the Marvel movies and such, and she's really good. So you're in. You're like going, wow, this looks okay. So she can use her mind. It's got a little Matrix-y sort of kind of feel to it. I was in. I bought the trailer and I bought my ticket to go for the ride, and it started off good, and then I'm just like, oh boy, that trailer, I could be watching the trailer and call it a day. I felt.
Let's start with a very big specific for me that I just have a question of, and maybe you guys watching, listening can also answer this. But to me, she rounded up the French guy because it was 2 options. You either evolve or you reproduce.
Right.
And did she have the notion because she was dying, she needed to reproduce? And that was the purpose of the French guy ultimately. But towards the end, as she realized that she didn't need to necessarily reproduce, that she could evolve, she didn't really need him.
No.
And to a degree, it was heartbroken.
Yeah. Wow, you really looked into that. I just took it as she knew she was evolving. Mm-hmm. She also knew that, she was potentially dying, because we don't know what was gonna. She saw her death. What what did she give herself? 27 hours or something. Yeah. So she saw her death, but as things were going along, she was evolving at such a rapid rate that then they throw in, to me, what was one of the most interesting aspects of the film. They throw in the thing of evolution and science not being necessarily based on math and based on time. And I was like, okay, this is an interesting concept, because throughout all of my schooling, throughout all of science fiction, math is the one constant that it can't be wrong. Math is the numbers. It's right there. And if you're a great mathematician, you can do everything by math and prove your work to an extent. But now it's saying it's not math. It's it's time. Time is the constant that we have to deal with. And I was like, okay, this is really interesting. And the Lucy character, I think, she took this in, because she ends up being, in a sense, it ends up becoming a prequel to She. She becomes the operating system at the end,
Yeah.
Right? I mean,
or her, you mean?
Her. Oh, I'm sorry, her. Yeah. She ends up becoming the operating system, and her, because where did she go? And then they get the text, and it's like, I'm everywhere. And that sort of frightens me, number one. But I liked that science fiction notion where it made me go, oh, okay, so this is switching it up a bit. But it also showed a fantastic example of how time, not math, works with evolution, with the car going faster by, until hey, we see this car going by, and the faster it gets, becomes a blur, and then it can become so fast that it disappears. And I was like,
never there.
I'm like, oh, that's cool. We know that we saw the car, but it is running faster than time. It disappears. Yeah. And I was like, that was cool to me. Yeah, I like that.
So, okay, without being blasphemous, if the notion to attain 100% of your brain capacity, and, as the movie shows, is that basically becoming a deity? Is that becoming one with God?
It's one with yourself. It's one. I mean, if you could have 100% capacity of your brain, number one, it just seems like an awful waste of space. Doesn't it? I mean, if they say we're only using, so we have this brain in our head, okay?
By the way, for those of you listening, we're talking the movie science.
The movie science. We're talking a movie. Yeah, we're talking movie science.
We'll talk science later.
But I'm just like, and this was one thing that the movie got me thinking about, in fact, is that, wow, we're only using 10% of our brain. Now, that's not new news. Luc Besson is taking, from years of science and magazine
I'll
articles.
actually disprove that.
But, we've been talking, I mean, it's been talked about using the capacity.
Wrong.
What?
Absolutely wrong.
What's absolutely wrong?
That we only use 10% of our brain.
Oh, okay. Well, I don't, I'm just saying, it has been said before. He wasn't making something up.
I get that it's the most common thing. And, I mean, Wedding Crashers even used it as a joke of but what if we only use 10% of our hearts and all that?
Right.
That was a great famous line.
Right.
So I get it. I get he's going off of that stereotype, but I'll disprove.
I want to talk. Yeah, I mean, because to me, I started. I became, because the movie is predicated on that, and it's like, wow, if I have this brain, which isn't that big, and I'm only using 10%, some people would argue less, and there's another 90% of my brain that, like, wow, what could I do? Maybe I would have been better at math. I would have loved to have been able to have gotten and not have needed a tutor for that stuff. But I mean, to use 100% of your brain, well, how much do we use? Like, from your research? And
I mean, here's the thing. It's using 10% of your brain is a philosophical thing of how much are you actually utilizing your capacity. But in terms of full use, you are using 100% because all the electrical neurons and things like that. Everything has to be firing. It's not like there's a portion of your brain that you're using versus there's the 90% other percent of it that's not being used. which is why, even when you drink and things like that, you can lose all that stuff.
Yeah, and if you get a lobotomy, that's a small percentage, and it changes. It's just, I like the premise as to what does she become. I mean, when she says I'm I'm everywhere. You can look at it as
she's timeless.
She's timeless. She's a deity. She still has control of electronics and the things around her. So where does that put her? To me, the end, if you want to think about it, was scarier than anything else, because we don't know how stable this. Is she going to be good, bad? Like, now that she's everywhere, and she's proven that she's everywhere, and she can get into our phone systems, and what else can she do? She can obviously control people's minds, matter. Who knows about weather?
Weather's matter.
She's evolved. She's transcended, and I think that's part of the thing.
The biggest question for me was, what's the reach? Now she's everywhere, so the reach is like, it could be basically infinite, right? But like early on, what was the radius that she could affect? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
The simple answer could be the Earth, but okay, can she go as far as moving the sun? Can she go?
I know. Yeah. I never gave it that much thought. But, well, according to the movie, it looked like she could be within city blocks. I mean, she was in a car, and she was able to hone in on cell phone signals to try to listen. Imagery-wise, I thought it was sort of cool. It was Matrixy, but I liked the strings and how she was able to like part them and pare it down to the bad guys. I don't know. I mean, she was never really given limitations. She only grew, and she grew stronger, more powerful. She was like the Bionic Woman.
I mean, it's just, I wish I had it more, but Michael Crichton, ironically, in The Lost World, the book, not the movie, he actually explains kind of evolution pretty well, and the factors that go into it. Part of it's, forces acting upon it. Part of it's, necessity, and how things develop, how two things evolving at the same time force both things to evolve faster than normal rate. And I think some of those theories apply to this, because I guess that is to say, the whole notion of how this movie works is just basically like dolphins use 20% of their brains, and they have echolocation, right? Which is a technique that they had to develop, and it's something that you gain at 20% brain capacity, right? So how the rest of it, how you're able to move matter and the rest of it, I don't necessarily. But you're developing these techniques, and so that's the catalyst for all of this, is just echolocation.
And Luc Besson had to do something to show us her evolution, so to speak. It was funny. I just thought too. There was another movie that dealt with drugs that opened up the mind's brain, and it starred Robert De Niro and Bradley Cooper, where he took a mind-altering drug that made him smarter, and he could see things like right now I'll look that up, but again, limitless. Thank you. And because it was limitless, but as soon as he stopped taking the drug, it had some really bad after effects on him. And I don't know, this one, again, it just sort of kind of reminds me of what was because she needed to take the drug. She needed to feed on that. And she realized that if she took that was her sustenance, that she could survive. That was a funny scene where she tears into the bag and she was eating it like she had a trough. So, but I don't know. To me, what's interesting too is that, this movie for Besson started taking shape about over 10 years ago, where he was at a regional promotional dinner for one of his films, and he sat next to what was she was a professor in nuclear cells and researching cancer, and they had this conversation throughout the entire night, and Luc Besson was just like really fascinated by what she had to say about all of this information about the brain and its capacity. And he was like, wow, what if I could make a movie like this? And he started writing it about 10 years ago. And, he says he took his time and thought about this film for a long time. And I don't know, maybe not long enough. I was expecting, again, I just got duped in by the trailers, and I was hoping that there was going to be a little bit more. Like, it would have been nice to see. I mean, Scarlett Johansson basically turns into Data, in a sense. She became emotionless, but it would have been nice to see grappling with maybe the good and the bad of this. And, you know, the benefits could be great, but if I'm using this for bad things, like, it would have been nicer to explore this character, this female character, and give her some more weight other than what she became.
I think early on, right? I thought, and I think you would agree with this because you kind of mentioned it, but early on in the film, right before we got to Morgan Freeman, it was flowing really well.
It really was.
You know, and the reason for that is it was simple. It was about a woman who was duped into doing this, and she had no other way to get out of this. She was trying, and it just flowed so well. No one spoke her language. They had to get the translator and everything, and it was real time. We didn't have to rely on subtitles because we're seeing it from her perspective and whatever else. And then, I think it would have been fine if it stayed kind of like that as an action movie, and you had this drug that just kind of explained some things. But I think by putting in so much theory but wanting to ultimately make an action movie is where it hindered.
Yeah, I agree. And
because if it was slightly simpler, it would have been just fine.
And you're right, because from the get-go, you introduce us to Scarlett Johansson, you introduce us to Lucy, and instantly we're very sympathetic for her. We're very sympathetic because she gets dragged into this thing. She's duped. She doesn't want to do this. Clearly, she says, no, and the guy slaps the handcuff. He Blues Brothers her with the case, and then she gets whisked off on this thing, and the next thing you know, she has an incision and she has this packet inside her. So you're right, we sympathize with the character. I wish that, and again, once it got into the action, which is a Luc Besson, I mean, he's strong with action. I mean, he has been strong with action. I don't know. You sort of kind of lost sympathy for Lucy. I did. There was one scene where I thought it was working, and there was a scene where she was talking to her mom on the phone. A couple of things going on in this scene. At first, it was very coherent conversation, and you hear, and she was crying because she didn't know what was going to happen to her. I was like, okay, this is a nice scene. But then she started to prattle on, almost like in a drunken stupor. And if I were somebody on the other line, I would have been, honey, you want something? Honey?
Especially when she got, I can remember the taste of here. And, okay, I get maybe from a, not to be rude about it, but maybe from a French perspective, that is beautiful. But from an American audience, just everyday movie-going experience, they're going to laugh at that.
Yeah, well, the thing that I laughed at was I can remember the pain of having my braces put on. And it was a close-up, if you remember, it was a close-up of Scarlett Johansson's face. And if you were looking closely, because this stood out to me, as soon as she said it, was her bottom row of teeth, they're a little bit crooked. And I'm like, well, I hope they put stop payment on that check, because wow. And then I like Scarlett Johansson because it proved that she's not perfect, but she's still very attractive. But I was like, wow, how did you miss? You were so close up. How could you say that she even had braces? They didn't seem to work. But that conversation went on as if she were in a drunken stupor, and I lost the sympathy because the phone call starts off as, Mom, I might be dying. I just want to say I love you. And had they just done that without the, I can taste, I could still taste your breast milk, and I remember what, it lost me. The scene lost me, where I thought it should have been a tender moment. And I was like, okay, this is what she's grappling with. This is great because it's an emotion that we haven't seen yet. And she's got to try to figure things out. And she knows that she's losing her humanity. And she's trying to remember all these things. And those are always great themes in science fiction. I just think it didn't go anywhere. It just got dopey.
Do you remember Fringe, when Peter is turning himself into an observer?
Yes.
That's kind of what I get the feeling from what you're talking about.
Yeah, when he was turning into observer, but don't forget, Fringe, you had episodes in which to lead that arc. This was a 90-minute movie. There were, she didn't want to become this. She was thrown into this, the Lucy being, and she was losing her humanity. And I felt, wow, this is a great topic. She doesn't want to lose her humanity. These are all the things that are very important to her. And she calls her mom, like, your motherly figure is one of the things that's most closest to you. And, it started off in one direction and then it just went somewhere else. And, Peter becoming what he wanted to become, an observer for a particular reason in Fringe. If I remember, it's been a couple of years. But yes, in a sense, yeah, you're correct. Sort of, kind of, except for Lucy, she was forced into becoming this. She didn't want any part of it at all.
Correct. Now, speaking of kind of what made her this way, the CPH4 drug. Mm-hmm. I found that interesting because early on, I didn't realize that was going to be the drug. I mean, the trailers have it, so, maybe I just didn't see the right trailer or just forgot that notion where, it goes through her blood. But I thought it would be her just kind of out of necessity in the dire situation that she is, that she would evolve, because that, that would be the Earth acting upon her. Right. To deal with her situation rather than this drug kind of doing it. So I'm curious to know, because it is a drug and anyone could take it in theory, what is your perspective on this drug? Because we were going to sell it to half of Europe.
Yeah, and it would have been, well, it's interesting because the perspective on the drug is there was that one gentleman at the sort of at the beginning of the movie when Lucy was brought into the big boardroom, with the big bad, and to test the product, they injected it into a drug addict who already seemed like he was lost anyways, and he just starts cackling like Joker. And then he gets shot. So, but obviously he was seeing something from a needle's worth of the drug that was put into him. I mean, the OD on that. I don't know. Does it?
Do you get enhanced or you just get high?
My guess is it's a combination. The enhancement makes the high because that guy clearly got high and he saw something that nobody else in that room.
He was already a junkie, so I mean, if you're in movie terms of this, if you're going to talk about any brain capacity, he must be at 1.
Yeah,
so
clearly,
and we don't really get to see him. He doesn't get a chance at it. He's shot right then and there.
Yeah, he's shot right there. I don't know what they use for this drug is. It seems to be a mind-altering drug that in proper doses, but what Lucy's condition is, she's taking the drug in raw form. I mean, that is in her gut. She gets kicked in the gut, the bag breaks, it all just pours right out in her stomach, and she's getting that in raw form, and we see what happens there. I don't know. I think that the drug was meant to be a mind-altering drug, like a PCP or mushrooms or something to that effect. I don't know. I think they were just putting a new drug on the market that looked blue. What are your thoughts?
Well, because so much was made of it, and there was that hospital scene of like, wait, CPH4, that's what mothers, produce, and things of that nature, but they only produce the tiniest amount. And so don't forget, symbolic, this was because it's something we've had since birth. Right. Everyone has to have,
right?
But just in the smallest form. And so it's ironic that as adults now, this is the new drug wave of like we're almost returning back to being children.
Yeah, and don't forget though too. I think it was mentioned. It was made mention that this was a artificially produced, like. There was nothing natural about this. This took the elements of CPH4, the actual thing from the body, and they just chemically produced it. So who knows? I mean, if they're chemically producing it, they got to be altering something. It's maybe it's a variation of the CPH4. Yeah. It was so new they didn't even have a catchy name for it yet, if I remember correctly.
CPH4.
So. I don't know. We're almost thinking too much about it. But I just took it. It was supposed to be a mind-altering drug to take you somewhere else, and then get that it'd go away.
In film terms, it's kind of a MacGuffin. So I get that, but it's just such a unlike most MacGuffins, right? It would just be money. Like hey, we need to get this $1 million or whatever the case may be.
Right.
And that's simple to understand.
Right.
Or just drugs in general can be a MacGuffin too. But the fact that there's a weird, there's that slight history of the motherhood and this, it just, and where she's the only one kind of affected, but we're going to sell it to other people.
Right.
You know what I mean? It's not like Spider-Man where, like, okay, he's, yes, there's other radioactives, but it's by accident that he gets bitten. Like, no, we're about to let others consume this on the mass market.
Right. In a controlled way, too. I mean, they were going to create this drug. They could create how strong or how weak it could be. Who knows? It's only when it's in its rawest form. I mean, Lucy was the special case. I mean, she took a bag of this in its rawest form, which changed her capacity of just thinking and just changed her life completely, where she literally was evolving as the movie was going on. 20%, 30%. It would have been funny, or maybe not funny, but, since they made it a point to say that dolphins use 20% of their brain, and they use this echolocation, and they were the ones that they invented radar because they could. Basically, it would have been nice to see Lucy use radar to do something. Yeah. But, maybe she was in a dark room and I don't know. Luc Besson too, in doing this, he actually worked with researchers and scientists. I mean, this woman so inspired him, this cancer research scientist so inspired him that he literally became a founding member of ICM, the Brain and Spine Institute in Paris. And he would talk to these people and he would say, what would happen if we were able to use more than 20% of our brain's capacity? And he was thinking about doing this movie, and he said, I didn't want to make a documentary about the brain, but what if I were to make a film about this happening to somebody, and, how do I make it so that it doesn't come off goofy and everything? So his intentions, I think, were sound, and I think that there was something there that could have been interesting for a science fiction movie. I don't know. But he ended up Luc Bessoning himself, is what I call it, because when I look at his most recent movies, they have a pattern to them as far as the action goes, and a lot of it doesn't make sense. But this one, I was hoping. I just, after this movie, I sort of kind of lose hope for him. I'm not sure.
Let's talk about the action.
He did spend time making this movie. 10 years.
He did, and this was the most money for him spent on special effects for a movie.
Yeah, it actually put his company. It was a big risk for EuropaCorp, and doing this. And again, I think that with how he basically put EuropaCorp to the test with this movie, and he keeps everything usually at a minimal budget. This one, I will say this for him. I will give him credit. He wrote and he directed it. He didn't parcel it out to Megaton or whatever. He did it himself because he knew his company was on the line. And I sort of kind of like that he steps up to the plate, because if things didn't go the way they did, which was becoming #1 at the box office, doing really well, he would have taken the burden on his shoulders, which I respect that. So, but you're right. I mean, it was a big risk for his company to do, for them, but it paid off. And again, he makes movies, whether he's directing them or not, that are greatly marketed. When you look at the trailers to Colombiana, I wanted to see that movie. Zoe Saldana kicking ass, taking revenge against the mob. That would be great. 3 Days to Kill, Kevin Costner, action hero coming back, and and he's put it, and again he's dying, and he's given a drug which will keep him alive only if he does these certain tasks for like a secret government agency, and then you see the movies and they're not what's necessarily portrayed. Same thing with Lucy. And I think it's the marketing. You had Scarlett Johansson, as we talked about. She's just hot right now, and You know, and so when you put her in a movie and you put her in an action movie with like a 2-minute trailer that just looks like, wow, she gets this power and she's kicking ass. Like, you're like, I'm in. I'm going to buy that ticket. And, you know, so that's how I think they end up getting their money. The movie's #1 at the box office. So Luc Besson gets to say, hey, Europa Corp is good. I'm good. I can continue to make movies. So, you know.
What was your favorite action sequence?
Favorite action sequence. You know, I'm gonna have to say I really liked when, and it's sort of kind of in the trailer, but I did like how when she first gets, you know, when she first is going through the change, and she takes out those henchmen, like wherever she was. And it was weird because I could have swore she was given a passport to go somewhere far away, but it seemed like she was like 3 blocks down from thing. But I like that scene because she takes care of that one guy, you know, and how she uses his belt, gets the gun, and then the way she just walks into that other room and she's like, hey, and then she shoots all the guys, and then she comes up to the cabbies, you speak English? No, and she shoots him, him in the leg. I like that scene. I still think, to me, that scene was probably my favorite.
Yeah,
I think because it was, for me, it was her being her most physical.
Yeah,
where everything else wasn't as physical. She could just use her powers to
do what she needed
to do.
Yeah,
but when she gets physical, she's great.
Yeah, you know, right from there, you know, it's set really the tone for the rest of it, where she's convulsing, but she's like upside down, sideways, every which way she can be.
Mm-hmm.
And you know, I was always curious, you know, if she was just kind of on the ceiling, I could get how they filmed it, but then she was sideways, all in the same kind of shot. So I was like, oh, that's really cool.
Yeah. Yeah,
You know?
it just, you know, one more Chris Nolan inspiration for you being in a gimbal and having people like trying to maneuver in a room and locking your camera down. It was a great shot. It was great. You know, it was a great scene. But yeah, I think that the beginning was probably the best. You know, look, Scarlett Johansson's a very good actress, you know, and she can do drama. She can obviously carry action. And like I said, I think that was a major draw. That's why it did so well. You had a great trailer. People like her. People want to see action. You got the males to go. We were talking about this. How does it beat Hercules? Well, it beat Hercules because of advertising and marketing. I think Hercules actually got better reviews than Lucy did. You know, it's The Rock. But, you know, when I think, too, we are sort of kind of starved. This has been written about, too, that we're looking for female-driven movies. Because
I mean, there's a great article about how the necessity for diversity within Hollywood actually produces greater success for movies in general.
Yeah, and when you know, you take it, for example, The Other Woman, which opened up really well. I'm not a fan of it, but again, when you're looking at, I think we're just starved to look at, you know, to find a character that we can empathize with, that women and men alike can go out on a date and still really enjoy that movie. And again, I think that Luc Besson really, he used to write strongly for women, and, you know, and back in the heyday, that, I don't know, it's almost like Hollywood almost loses its way.
Well, how did you feel, you know, to that point, how do you feel about Scarlett Johansson? There was an article where she disliked the scene where she was in her underwear, right? So it's just when she's finding out about her cuts and things like that. And looking at the movie as a whole, yeah, you could get rid of that scene and you'd be okay. But, you know, it's there mainly, I mean, it fits, but it's also there for guys. Because basically the guy comes in and he's like, get dressed. And that's the point of that scene.
This is the scene where she's in bed.
Yes.
We're talking about. You know, personally, I didn't. You know, I don't know. I didn't find it. If it was a guy, if there was a guy, if like just switch the roles, nobody would say anything about it. Like, and
well, it's not that. It just, well,
I didn't find it exploitive. I'll just say that I didn't find it exploitive.
Well, again, you know, whether or not. I'm not saying from a mass perspective, it's her saying specifically that she felt that scene was unneeded. So, you know, again, there could be if you switched it to be a guy and the male actor was like, okay, that was a bit unnecessary. I didn't need to be in my underwear.
Sure.
Then, okay, it would be, so it's not people having a problem with it. It's her.
Yeah, I mean, I found this scene. I found her, waking up in bed. It just seemed logical to me. Like I didn't look at it. I didn't.
It wasn't gratuitous.
Yeah,
by
I didn't
any
find
means.
it to be gratuitous. I mean, hell,
Had she
we
been
talk
just,
about
like,
under her
absolute-
skin. Yeah, right. Under her skin, she's walking around naked for a good chunk of that movie. This movie, I didn't find it to be the violence in it. The movie was more gratuitous than that one scene.
Yeah.
So I didn't find it exploitive. The movie stayed in. That scene stayed in.
So is
how
the
do you
headline
end
going to
it?
read, Demetri says, "Scars Joe, get over it"?
No, I wouldn't say that to her. I mean, because the movie works, and it works with that scene. I don't know how you cut it out, because you have to have her awakening, and like with the blood on the towel and going like, what the hell just happened to me? And I wouldn't have expected her, I guess, if something that major happened, I wouldn't have expected her to be fully clothed again. No. But I don't know, that the scene was okay.
I think the movie as a whole works because it's 89 minutes, but that's including credits.
Yeah.
So just in general, it's shorter even than 90 minutes. And while Hercules, you mentioned it, by critic standards, maybe a little bit better, it's 2 hours.
Yeah.
And you know what? In this, right now, especially with the summer, it's not bad to go to a less than 90-minute movie.
No, and
especially with now you have Boyhood out, which is a great movie, but that's almost 3 hours. And
it's almost 3 hours. Wish I Was Here is like close to 2 hours, which we'll talk about later. A lot. Jesus Christ, we talked about this. Transformers was 2 hours and 45 minutes. I mean, there is something to be said about the brevity of Lucy, and it moved. I will say that. I wasn't bored. It didn't seem like it was extra long to me. It was paced fine, and it ended probably when it should have ended. And, you're in and you're out, and you can. If you're an audience member, you're either going to give it thought after, or you're just going to go into your next movie. Is the way I look at it. It didn't, it's brevity is probably its greatest asset, I think, going into this movie.
It could be.
So I don't. Yeah.
I mean, again, for me, it's had this been. I think it could have been 2 hours where they got into the science a little bit and emotion, and that could have made it better. But then again, I'm like, was it the greatest movie in the world? Not necessarily. But I didn't mind it because I got in, I got out, and I enjoyed the moments that were there. And
some of the moments, yeah. I mean, the movie, it starts, it ends, it's over. There was a pacing to it, but I found the action, again, I sort of kind of have to buy certain things that happen. And, this drug boss, who is purely not a nice guy. He's not a good guy. He's really a bad guy, and the mere fact and what he does to Lucy's character is unconscionable, because all she was in a sense like a mule. She didn't do anything. She had this thing strapped to her wrist, and okay, she gets off. This horrible other thing happens to her where she gets kicked in. Like, I didn't know what was going on necessarily. I thought she was supposed to be a mule and be sent somewhere where this is supposed to be taken out, but yet she seems to be in this sort of kind of dungy prison. She's held as a captive. She's kicked. She's savagely beaten. This thing opens up. She becomes a higher elevated person. She shoots all those people. She goes back to the Kingpin's penthouse, dispatches with his guys, and that scene actually was sort of kind of cool where she shoots through the door. Maybe that is when she was using echolocation. I mean, she literally shoots through the door, shoots everybody.
That's when you just needed to insert Dolphin.
Right. And I would have gotten it because I'm only a 10% or less. And she has the Kingpin. It's this great scene where he's like, I don't know, he's in his hot tub or he's getting something. He's getting
he's getting his facial massage and all that.
And, she comes up and boom with these knives, just stabs him. And I would have liked to have seen more happen, but then she lets him live. And I'm like, why? Like, and then,
I actually really like that scene because she proved her point where she's like, the only thing you can think about right now is pain. So you have 10% of your brain, and you can't even use that because all you can think of is one singular thing,
right?
And that I have caused upon you, and that is how pathetic you are.
Yeah, and then so pathetic that you needed him to stay alive because you needed somebody to chase her at the movie, you know. But wouldn't it have been more interesting if maybe he took this drug, like, as a whole, and he started to transcend and start to get the same powers? Like, wouldn't it have been interesting to match her up with a villain that could almost equally have the same powers that she had, and that at the end of the movie, it was like sort of kind of like the end battle in Scanners, where they're just like using their minds to fight against each other? To me, that might have been a little bit more interesting. Like, she lets the guy live, and he's like, well, screw this. Like, and he gets a bag, and he like a horse to a trot. He just like a bucket. He just eats it, and he starts to get these powers. And then again, it shows the good and evil aspects of it. In good hands, what does this do? You know, absolute power, absolutely corrupts, perhaps, maybe, or can we use it for good? Like, if you have 100% capacity of your brain, it doesn't mean that the person who has that capacity is a good guy, you know? And what does it mean for the rest of humanity? So there were other things to explore that I just felt Lucy didn't. And when we came to the end, you know, I don't know, it almost seemed like, hey, I get to spend a couple of months in France. Oh, this is great. And like you said, Morgan Freeman, all he had to do was stand up behind a podium and read his lines. I mean, he may have had his lines at the podium to talk about it.
Because it would have been part of the whole thing.
Right, it would have been part of the whole thing. So
it's not like, oh, there's his lines. Well, yeah, because I have a speech written.
Right. It you know, and then it took me, you know, and then that whole scene where he's in his hotel room and she takes control of all of the electronics. And, you know, I was like thinking, why is he still on the phone? You know, but I guess she needed to hear him. I don't know. It was just interesting. I wish there was a little bit more time with Scarlett Johansson and Morgan Freeman. Mm-hmm. Because again, when we talk about the philosophy of this science and what its potential can be, like, again, it goes back to really good science fiction. When you're trying to figure out what's the potential and what does it mean for humanity, what does it mean to evolve at such a rate? Is it good? Is it bad? Does it change the nature of that person? Like, we don't know at the end if Scarlett Johansson's nature herself changes. I mean, we just know that she's everywhere now. Yeah. So, you know.
Well, we also know what's the full last line. Life was given to us 1 billion years ago, and now you know what to do with it. I don't know that we do. I don't know that we do.
I don't know that we do either. And you know, the opening, Lucy, the monkey, the ape too. You know, following Dawn of the Planet of the Apes. That was like one of the awfulest looking renderings of a monkey. I was like, you know, after what we just saw, there's sort of elements like that took me out. And you're right. I don't know that what we as humans, I don't know that we do know what's going to happen.
Yeah, I think just the controlling idea, I don't think was quite. You know, and I think here's the thing. I give him a lot of credit, and when you say that he did so much research, but I think it's also one of those things where you can do so much research that you want to cram it all in.
Sure.
And again, this is stuff that we've been trying to learn for, let's say, 200, maybe 300 years.
Sure.
Right? In the perspective of the world, that's not a lot of time. And what do we ultimately know? And science is only accurate to, let's say, I think it's like 97%.
Sure, yeah.
Well, because here's the thing, right? Let's say you and I could literally spend billions of dollars doing research on the color of ducks, right? And every duck that we find in the universe is black.
Yep.
So scientifically, all ducks are black. All it takes is one blue duck to come along, and there goes our theory.
Yeah.
That's all it takes. And so that's as accurate, and even math and anything of that nature can only be that accurate.
Yeah, and again, I think like his research almost seemed to be there. I mean, it pains me to hear that he spent so much time researching on this movie. Again, I agree with you.
But a conclusion must be drawn.
Yeah, and to me it was just don't be a mule and get your stomach kicked and have these broken into you, because that's not going to be that good for you. Because I don't know whether it was good or bad for Lucy. In the end, I mean, she obviously, again, she's a tragic hero in a sense because she didn't want this. And she was forced to grapple with it. And it's almost like she came to a means of, well, this is what it is now. Like, she
And here's the thing, like, if you, it's a couple things, right? Just drug, you know, I'll go back to the drugs, only because so many movies, right, are about how drugs are negatively affecting people.
Sure.
Whether that's a Scanner Darkly or whatever. And that typically tends to be how it's viewed. And also, if you kind of look at it, evolution is supposed to still create a balance, right? Things evolve, but ultimately, life itself balances. Which is why, like, ultimately, if us as humans are going to destroy the world, we're not destroying the world. We're going to kill ourselves.
Right.
The world will be just fine. It's,
Well, that's evolution.
Yeah.
The Earth continues to go around, like, long after the dinosaurs, long after whatever has happened. We continue to orbit a sun and
the
spin
world
in our
will
axis.
be fine whether or not humans live.
It balances
that's a
it out.
debate.
But
and that's what I'm saying. So with this evolution, what is going to be the counterbalance?
I don't think it wasn't shown in this movie. I mean, that's
the sequel.
I hope not. I mean, because I just, it'll make enough money. But where does Lucy 2 go? I mean, she doesn't need physical attributes anymore, and again, she has become her. This is what happened at the end of her. All the operating systems, like, said, "Screw you guys, I'm going home," and they collaborated together, and now they're out wherever they are.
Pardon the spoiler if you haven't seen that movie.
Well, we talked about it here, so
that doesn't mean everybody listens to every show.
Well, they should, please. But and that's what happens here. She becomes infinity, and again, I don't know if it's for good or for bad. It really wasn't. I don't know. I think it's almost like we're talking too much about it. I mean, we're talking a 90-minute movie that's a popcorn movie that comes out in the summertime, really marketed well. You can literally check your 10% brain at the door, enjoy your popcorn. And
well, that's the biggest debate, and that's the biggest irony, and that, and I think because of what it's trying to say about humans evolving,
right?
That's what the message is, but I think that, most people would say that's kind of what it is. It is a popcorn movie, and that's the big kind of negative criticism.
Yeah, and again, I think it's one of mine.
Have you seen Hercules, though, by the way?
I haven't seen it. I mean, this week, with Comic-Con last week going on, it was, trying to catch up with movies was really difficult for me. So one of them had to slip through the cracks, and sadly, it was Hercules.
Well, that seems to be the consensus. But
I put three other movies that I had to
I would have been interested to know, only because, again, I know we can talk about what we've read, but I don't know. I don't know what separates this from Hercules or vice versa.
I firmly believe, without having seen Hercules, I do firmly believe what separates Lucy from Hercules was the marketing. Clearly the marketing. They made this look like they have past Luc Besson movies. Again, whether he's directed them or not. Scarlett Johansson, focus on her. They sum everything up in 2 minutes. They tell you she's a mule. She gets kicked. This drug gets poured into her system. She becomes a higher power. She gains superhuman strength. She becomes a super, and you think, oh, this is going to be Scarlett Johansson kicking ass. And they did a great job of showing some great, quick action scenes. Her, she's able to, lay men out and just, with a wave of her fingers or a snap of her fingers, wave of her arms, armies just fall. And again, to me, that's sort of kind of boring. Because you don't have to do anything.
I mean, this was a technique throughout the movie, but I also like the title cards of 10%, 20%, 30%, and so we go to the title cards both in the movie and here, and then let's say 60%, and all of a sudden you see a wave of people just flying,
right?
And then 80% you see gunfights and this and whatever, so I like that part of it.
Yeah, and at least it was a timer. It kept you, because you knew eventually you were going to get to 100%. But again, when we talk about action, I felt that as the movie was going on, I felt that the action itself was becoming boring. There was nobody who could cross her path. There was nobody who could offer any type of resistance. to her. Like, you know, she's in that hallway and all the men come out and she just does this. They all fall down. There was that other scene in which the guys, it was sort of kind of silly. It was like they're pantomiming. They go ahead, take her out. And the guy goes to fist fight with her and he's like missing. And then she floats him up in the air and then everybody else floats up in the air. It didn't offer any, like, there was
okay. So let's talk, you know,
no conflict.
As a result of that, writing wise, the ticking time bomb became, you know,
what's going to happen.
Yeah. You know, and so everything kind of was pinned on that. Yes, you have these villains and things like that, but for the most part, even, you know, the head drug lord, he's not really going to have too much to do.
No.
But it was the time. And it was the thought of that, okay, she's going to die. And what does that mean? And is this all
or is she going to die? Or, I mean, because we were just, you know, the movie turns science sort of kind of on its heels by talking about it's not about the math, it's about time. And which is, in a sense, the movie is about time as we're leading towards the end. So I think the suspense was to be, what's going to happen to Lucy? What's going to happen to our character? What is she going to do? How is she going to transcend? And again, this was my other transcendence flashback, because from her, she had those tendrils coming out of her, like at the very end of Transcendence, where all that stuff, that ooze or whatever it was, there was that similar stuff going on with her, and she was turning into this supercomputer thing, and she was going to put everything on a USB.
She literally puts on a USB.
Yeah.
But again, it's stuff like that, you know.
What do we learn?
It's funny, but I there's that line in one movie where, you know, you have to trust that God speaks to you in terms you can understand. And so, like, in this movie, like, the fact that it's a USB, it's funny to me, and that's why I think in some way she has become one with God. You know,
yeah.
I don't know what the equivalent is, but she's now a deity.
She's in a higher plane for sure. I mean, I'm not going to say what higher plane. She's definitely in a higher plane. Will she be able to help out our good friend Morgan Freeman, the scientist, and nudge him along so that maybe humans go down the right path? I don't know. The movie never really, I think it almost wanted to explore that, but it sort of just left it, whatever. Like, this is the end. We have the knowledge now. We have everything in a USB, but what computer will be able to handle all that power and all that information? I don't know.
Well, what human? That was the big debate too. Well, first off, computers are man-made, right?
Correct.
And so, you know, the best sonar is not as good as the dolphins.
Right.
Second, are we ready for this? Blah blah.
Right.
That was the whole debate for Morgan Freeman.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I would like to see this lecture, by the way. Just in general, I think if they just posted like a 20-minute Morgan Freeman lecture on, like, let's say TED,
right?
You know what I mean? It actually might be kind of cool
on TED.
Yeah, but you know, I mean, I think it's a byproduct where he didn't necessarily want to do a documentary, but I think that ironically that speech itself, just solo, could actually be quite interesting.
A documentary, yeah. I mean, you know, it was, again, the philosophy behind the science and where it leads. I liked how it was split into the two. You either evolve, because, and again, it was how nature, it's how we react to certain things that nature throws at us. It's like, we can either fight it, try to evolve, or we just reproduce, or we can't reproduce. And it's because of the environment around us too, which leads me to, you know, I don't know what the environment around Lucy was outside of the violence of what was going on. I just don't know what Lucy was going to become. You know, so in the end, these are the things that I was thinking about that made me not like this movie. There was potential there. And again, Luc Besson used to write for good, strong female characters. And I was hoping for that. Lord knows that, you know, Scarlett Johansson can play that, and she can play it with a depth. Listen, I'll go back to Captain America Winter Soldier. Her character was she was so good. And, you know, she did have this compassion. She was a strongly written female character who was meant to partner up with Captain America. She was a strong woman. It was great. You know, and in this movie, I was hoping for her to be a strong woman grappling with this, but it just ends up being a dopey action movie. in my expectations too, like I said, for me, I'm living in the past with Luc Besson, and I have the optimism that he's going to make a good movie again, but I think it was dashed.
Yeah, and I think
Sorry to say.
one way or the other, it could have been great. It's just when it teetered both ways, it didn't. People are left wondering which way to go.
And I think too for women, I mean, and again, you can't argue. Let's look at this for a second. You can't argue the numbers. The production of this movie the production budget alone was $40 million, $75 million, including hard drive delivery, and advertising and such. So that's $35 million that Universal put into the marketing, which is a decent sum. Okay, it was number one at the box office, did close to $44 million at the box office opening weekend. As we talked about, it trumped out Hercules, which was, The Rock, which too was marketed, but I think this was just marketed better. And right now it was between $63-65 million. So in overseas, I mean, Luc Besson is popular overseas, so it's going to make its money back. It's going to do really well. And I think part of the reason is because of Scarlett Johansson. I think because people go in, and I think that they're sort of kind of starved to see a female action hero. I just wish that they could make it a little bit better. And why can't we? I mean, we've had Ripley before. I know I go back to this well a lot, but when you look at what Linda Hamilton meant to the Terminator and how strong that female character was, when you look at Ripley in Alien and Aliens and what James Cameron was able to bring about, hell, I'll even go as far, I'll even say that Jamie Lee Curtis in, say, Halloween or H2O is a much stronger character than Lucy, and there's something to it. Or True Lies. I mean, look what Jamie Lee Curtis does in True Lies. I mean, that character has a complete change, a complete arc, and the movie doesn't work without her. And Mary Elizabeth Mastrantonio in The Abyss. These are all James Cameron movies, and I've said this, he knows how to write strong female characters, and I just wish that we could get some more strong female written characters where we might empathize. People are going for the popcorn aspect. It's summer. Scarlett Johansson, she works, she looks great, she does it really well. That's why this movie was number one at the box office.
Well, fans, we've kept this debate going long enough. So we're going to let you guys continue it at home. Let us know whether or not you just enjoyed it because you were able to turn your brain off, or perhaps maybe you're a little frustrated because you didn't quite want to turn off your brain. You wanted to think about some of these things. And at random, let's say by next week, we will pick a winner to receive a Lucy iPhone 5 cover that Demetri got when he went to see the movie.
My personal cover, courtesy of Cinemark XD, and courtesy of now myself and Anatomy of a Movie.
So hopefully you have an iPhone 5.
Hopefully,
Let's start with hopefully you have an iPhone.
Yeah.
Then it's a 5. So it weeds out a couple of the people. But hey, you know what? Give it to a friend if you don't have one. That doesn't mean you shouldn't comment just because you don't have an iPhone or an iPhone 5 specifically. Let us know your thoughts. And hey, you know what? If it's a good enough comment, maybe I'll throw in something to the pot for those of you who don't have iPhones.
But this is our first time that we're doing a giveaway like this, and glad to be able to share it with everybody else. And again, if I didn't have my
I've given away my heart and soul to this thing, so it's not our first giveaway!
Okay, you're right.
It's our first physical giveaway.
Cheers to that. Yes.
And on that note, thank you guys for joining us. You can find Demetri here on most of the Anatomy of a Movie podcasts. He's certainly here when he can. If he's not here, he's got a perhaps. We've got so many great movies coming up. In particular, we will have Boyhood coming up. Wish I Was Here. Then
Guardians of the Galaxy.
And we just did an interview with Noel Fisher, who plays Michelangelo in the new Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, which we will be discussing, of course. And so many great things in the past. Some of you guys are digging into that well and seeing old movies, or seeing old dissections we've done about movies as they come out on DVD now. So thank you guys. We appreciate that. It's
awesome.
The great part about movies, they live on forever. You can check them out. Hopefully, maybe now you're listening to this from 50 years from when Demetri is talking about his Star Wars... Star Trek thing. So, we love you.
We do.
And we'll see you here
we all do.
Next time.
From producers Maria Menounos, Kevin Undergaro, Phil Svitek, and the rest of the Anatomy of a Movie staff, we would like to thank you for listening and subscribing to the show. If you have any questions or comments, feel free to email or tweet us. I'm Sir Richard Wentworth, and this has been Anatomy of a Movie.
Thanks for watching Anatomy of a Movie on YouTube. For more on your favorite movies, subscribe to our channel here and be sure to let us know what you think in our comment section below here. Bye.